Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in our Trailblazer segment, brought to you by FinTech TV, we delve into a harrowing story of courage, resilience, and the stark reality faced by Iranian dissidents. Today, we're joined by Gazelle Sharmahd, a human rights activist, co-host of the War and Freedom podcast, and the daughter of German-American journalist Jimmy Sharmahd, who has been kidnapped by the Islamic regime since 2020. He's currently still held prisoner in Iran. Through her family's ordeal, Gazelle is going to shed light on the systemic abuses and targeted attacks that activists and their families endure. We're going to explore the phases of persecution, from character assassination to direct threats, and finally to abduction and sentencing. This narrative is not just about one family, but reflects a broader, disturbing pattern of human rights violations by the Iranian government. Gazelle's story brings to the forefront critical questions about the role of governments worldwide in protecting their citizens. Join us now as we uncover the truth behind these injustices and discuss what needs to be done to ensure the safety and protection of those fighting for freedom and justice. Joining me now to the show is Gazelle Sharmahd. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Wow. Okay. So let's dive right in. Can you tell us about your father and his background and what led to his involvement in activism that put him at risk?
My dad, Jimmy, he was born in Iran, but he was raised in Germany. And the last 2 decades we spent in America. So he had a life in Western countries. He had all of his freedoms, but he never stopped to look back at the people of Iran and realizing just because they were unlucky and they couldn't flee after the Islamic regime took over the country and made it into this dictatorship and terrorized their people, just because they were not able to flee doesn't mean that he has to forget about them. So there was always an internal drive to help the people of Iran and get them more freedom, get their voices out. So that's how he started his way into activism.
Now, let's talk about targeting dissidents abroad. So, the Iranian regime has a documented history of targeting dissidents abroad. A 2021 report by the US State Department highlighted several instances where Iranian intelligence services attempted or carried out attacks on dissidents living in Europe and North America. And according to Amnesty International, Iran has a long history of human rights abuses, including arbitrary detention, torture, and executions. In 2020 alone, at least 275 people were executed, making Iran one of the top executioners in the world. Now, let's talk about character assassination and allegations. Your father was accused of being a spy for Mossad, CIA, and having links to the IRGC. How did these allegations affect him personally and professionally?
It's a pattern because my dad knew about the character assassination, how they come forward. He tried to not get too much riled up about like all of these accusations, but it affects you. It affects you, of course, because people who go into human rights, people who become activists, are such noble people. They put away their work, they put away their family, they dedicate their life to a cause bigger than themselves. And trying to destroy their image and what they stand for takes a lot of effort by these terrorist regimes. So they try to vilify their opponents, make them into, as you said, spies, make them into murderers, make them into terrorists, make them into anything that you can think of that is bad for two reasons. One, they want to create doubt. When you create doubt about a person, people will not listen to that person. That person will be discouraged from continuing to be loud and outspoken. Two, the day they come and take you through kidnapping or assassination, they don't want a major backlash. They don't want people to stand up and defend that person. They want people to think, well, was this person really a good person? Do I really have to stand up for the person? I heard this rumor, I heard this allegation, I heard this accusation, and that's how they get you. And three, actually, there's a third point. In the case of the Islamic regime, they take you to a court, quote unquote, court over there that gives Western governments the excuse to not interfere because they look at that, at these sham trials, and they say, well, this is a court, there is a judge, there is a hearing. this person was probably guilty of something that they are in court right now. And that's how they brainwash people and governments and prevent them from helping you.
Terrible. And let's chat political prisoners. So there are thousands of political prisoners in Iran, including journalists and activists and dissidents, and your father. And Human Rights Watch reports that these individuals often face unfair trials, lack access to legal representation, and are subjected to harsh prison conditions. So the government's response to your father's allegations. So when these allegations surfaced, what support, if any, did your father receive from the US government to counter these claims?
From the US government, there were no reports whatsoever, nothing in the last 3 years. The first time they said something about my father publicly, they said it is horrific that he was taken. Everything it's a sham trial. But he's also a German citizen. So they were passing the responsibility ball to Germany. So that's the problem when you have two nationalities. When we grew up in Germany and we're living in the US, they play this responsibility ping pong with each other. Nobody's taking responsibility. Nobody is doing something to get him out. And nobody is even acknowledging that their citizen, that their national has been kidnapped in front of the eyes of the world. And if we don't acknowledge that, that gives the terrorist regime the okay to continue that. That will place all of us in danger. Because what does that mean if you can just pick up a journalist anywhere of the world and take them to Iran, put them in the sham trial, torture him, and no response comes? That means continue doing that. And that is a major threat to all of us.
So let's talk threats and intimidation. Can you describe the types of threats your father received and how they escalated over time? And how did these threats impact your family?
The first threat started when my dad's website, he had a website back in the early 2000s where people from inside of Iran were able to speak freely. You know, everything is censored inside of Iran. So when he was doing that, he and his partner were, their faces were shown on national TV in Iran, vilified, made into the enemy number one. And then the threats began, threats to their life, threats to our lives as his family. Up until 2009, when they sent assassins to Los Angeles to our door to murder us. And thankfully to the FBI and to the offices here, it was foiled. The assassin went to jail for a year, but it never stopped, you know?
For a year?
For a year until what we believe was a prisoner exchange. He was given permission to go back to Iran to visit his father for some reason, and a hostage that was held in Iran, who is American, came back to the US. They're still not admitting that it was a prisoner exchange, but we believe that that's what happened to the assassin of my father. You are never safe. You have constant threats. You have constant threats to your family back in Iran, because most of us still have family back there and they're taken into custody and put pressure on them for you to be quiet, for you to stop your advocacy. With me, it's the same thing. Now that I'm advocating for my father, for political prisoners, and for hostages, I'm not safe to travel. I'm not safe to go anywhere that I want because I become a target.
Now let's talk about protection against threats and being a target. What measures did your father take, if any, to protect himself and his family? Did he receive any assistance from government agencies?
Well, when the assassin came over here to murder my father, of course, the authorities, the police, the FBI were involved. But if you think that we get any special protection, even though they see that we are targets of assassination, targets of transnational repression, that does not happen. That does not happen. We're told to be more quiet. We're told to stop advocacy. We're told, some journalists are told to go into witness protection. That means changing your identity, going underground, stopping what you're doing. And it is so important for us to be out there and to be loud and to be protected, because we're trying to save the lives of others whose voice have been taken away. So telling activists, shut up or you're not protected, is actually emboldening the oppressor over there that also wants to do that. So I don't have protection when I'm traveling. I have to get my own protection when I'm going to Europe to speak to my government over there. I don't feel safe over here. I cannot go on rallies. I cannot go on stages unless I know there is like super great security there. So it affects your life.
Yeah, it sure does. And the Iranian government is known to frequently use character assassinations against dissidents like your father, accusing them of espionage or ties to terrorist organizations without evidence. And this tactic really does aim to discredit and isolate activists from international support. It's completely a vicious cycle that never ends. And our Western governments play a key part in all of this. So let's chat abduction and government response. Can you detail the events leading to your father's abduction? What was the immediate response from the US government once he was taken?
My dad went on a business trip. He is a software engineer. He was traveling during the pandemic. Unfortunately, like when he traveled, the pandemic hit, and he was trying to go to India and back. He had a flight overlay. What usually happened during the pandemic was that your flight were canceled or rerouted. So he had a flight overlay in Dubai and called my mother from his hotel room. That was the last time that we knew he was okay. We saw him in his hotel room. We had a Google tracker on him, like the Google Maps where you can see where the other person is. And my mom was able to see that his Google tracker is moving, but he's not responding to her messages anymore. Within the next day, she was seeing that he was moving into a wrong direction. He was moving from Dubai over to the border of Oman, and then from there to the coast of Oman, and the tracker broke off. At that moment, she got a message from my dad's phone saying, "I'm okay." That was most likely the kidnappers messaging her. My dad would not just say, "I'm okay," after she's so worried. And the very next day, we saw him on state media in Iran, where they blindfolded him. The signs of torture, his face is swollen. He's confessing to so many crimes that he did not commit. And that was the moment when we woke up and we knew they got my dad. They have my dad. We did not know if he's alive, if they have executed him yet, what happened to him, where he is, nothing. Just that the enemy has my father. And the reaction of our governments was nothing. All the way from here to Japan, in the media picked up the narrative of the Islamic regime reporting that a terrorist ringleader or spy or whatnot was arrested in Iran. And we were screaming from the end of our lungs saying, he's not a terrorist ringleader or spy or anything. He's an activist and a journalist. And he was not arrested in Iran. He was kidnapped and taken there. And it took us months then to show to the world, to the journalists and everybody who was repeating this propaganda, what has really happened. And thankfully they changed after some time. But nobody cares if a terrorist or a spy gets arrested somewhere. Of course, there was no outcry. Of course, nobody was worried about that because they changed the narrative. And that is so powerful when they do that to you.
When was the last proof of life or sign that your father is okay that you had?
The last time he had a phone call with my mother, he's usually not allowed to talk to me, but only to my mother, was after October 7th.
Of this year?
Of last year, October.
Of 2023, October 7th of 2023.
Yeah. 1 week after October 7th, he was allowed a phone call. He sounded horrific. They're holding him at an unknown location. He's by himself. He has no human contact. Over 1,400 days he is in solitary confinement. Signs of torture. He could barely pronounce words, like after so long by yourself being tortured, you get weaker and weaker. And he's one of the strongest people that I know in my life, but I could hear it in his voice that he can't make it much longer in these conditions. And right now they're threatening execution. As you mentioned before, the amount of executions in Iran were last year more than 835 people were executed, and that is just like the number that they put out. So the reality is usually much higher.
Yeah. Now, your father has officially been sentenced to death by hanging. Is that accurate?
Yes, if you can call it a sentence, yes. There are no judges. There is no real court. There is no real files against him. But they have said that he is sentenced to death by hanging from a crane in public. That means in a public city, they put up a crane and they hang you there for the whole city to see. Why do they do that publicly? To tell all of the other dissidents, all of the other freedom fighters, this is what can happen to you. To tell us outside of the country, look, it doesn't matter if you're American, it doesn't matter if you're European, we can pick you up, we can bring you here, we can hang you to death, and your governments will do nothing to help you. And that is unfortunately the case, that's the world we're living in.
Wow. This is absolutely horrific. I am sorry you are going through this. I can't imagine what you're feeling, but you are strong and you are gonna fight for your dad. And I know you're doing it. I see you all over social media, and I'm very, very proud to have you on today. Now, call to action and hope for the future. What do you believe needs to change in terms of government responses and international cooperation to prevent such tragedies in the future? What can the public do to support your father's cause?
For my father's cause, the most important thing is what you're doing. Visibility in the media, in social media, gives people over there, gives my dad immunity. When the regime knows people care, people know his name, people support my voice, and I can go and be loud for him, they hesitate with the execution. They hesitate doing something to him. So it is life-saving what your journalists are doing and what followers are doing. Please follow me on my social media. And for in general, the Islamic regime has a business model of hostage taking for the last 45 years, the same model that Hamas and Hezbollah are copying. This business model needs to be stopped. The way we stop that is if we create a global task force. All of these countries that have hostages in Iran, in Gaza, in everywhere, need to come together and address this head on. We cannot stop talking about the hostage problem until it is solved. And until then, I want everybody to be loud and talk to their representative and ask, why hasn't this national be brought home? Who's talking about Jimmy Sharmahd? What are you doing to save him? And why haven't you done anything yet?
Ooh, we are officially out of time, my dear, but I thank you so much for coming on, being transparent. We will continue to get your story out there and share it with other outlets. I will continue to pray for your dad's safe return, and you must remain hopeful.
I will always. Thank you.
We are left with a profound understanding of the perilous journey faced by Iranian dissidents and their families. Gazelle and Jimmy's story is a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made in the fight for freedom and human rights. The systemic persecution by the Iranian regime, as detailed through Gazelle's experiences, underscores the urgent need for stronger international protections and responses. It's a call to action for governments, human rights organizations, and individuals worldwide to stand in solidarity with those who risk everything for justice. Thank you, Gazelle, for sharing your father's story and your unwavering resolve. And thank you to our viewers for joining us in this vital conversation. Together, we must continue to advocate for those voices that are silenced and work tirelessly towards a world where justice and human dignity prevail. That was our Trailblazer segment brought to you by FinTech TV, and that was the incredible Gazelle Sharmahd. You can check her out directly on Instagram and follow her at Free Jamshid Sharmahd. That's FreeJamshid Sharmahd. Free Jamshid Sharmahd. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is sponsored by FinTech TV.
FinTech TV, the newest streaming channel focused exclusively on the business of blockchain, digital assets, and sustainability. Broadcasting from our studio on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with daily reports from NASDAQ, global expansion, and 24/7 coverage. Become part of the launch. Head to fintech.tv/invest. Fintech.tv/invest.
Tune in to A Moment of Zen, Saturday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. on 710 WOR, the voice of New York.